Okay. Thank you, and warm welcome to this session on natural wine and the women behind the bottle. So women producers of natural wine, which is my focus. I am Camilla, and yeah, you did not butcher my last name. It's Gjerde. I used to be a political scientist, or I am still a political scientist, but I used to be a researcher. And I was an expert in political outsiders and extreme presidents long before Donald Trump came to power. So yeah, but I'm also a natural wine lover, and I've got a diploma in WSET, Wine and Spirits Education Trust. And I decided 4 years ago that I would go all into the natural wine world because of this big love that I have for natural wine. And I decided to write this book on women producers of natural wine because I really thought that it was something that was missing from the literature. Everything that I had written or read was basically about men. And I realized that most of my favorite producers were women, and it was really lacking. So I wanted to share some of the stories that they have, and also perhaps because of my previous experience from the Swedish government, because I used to work for the Swedish government and the Swedish parliament as well, writing reports and being very critical. I wanted to have sort of a, not just have the nice stories of how wonderful it is to be a natural wine grower and how fulfilling it is, but also to say something about the hardships and how people actually overcome these hardships. So the book is about some of my very favorite producers in Austria, Italy, and in my favorite region in France, the Jura. So I will take you on a tour to some of these today. But I will start just saying something about why I decided to change careers and why I fell into the rabbit hole of natural wine. And it was actually, let's see if I can share it was actually one of these bottles, a Frappato from Ariano Chipinti in Sicily, that really hit me hard back in 2008. And I had been studying wine for some time, and I thought I really, I started to get the hang of it, and yeah, how to taste and the different regions. And then I got this bottle. It was from a region I had not heard of, Vittoria in Sicily. And it was a grape variety I hadn't heard of, Frappato. And it just tasted so differently from anything I had tried. It was alive, it was ever changing. And it was like, no, I can't go back to the stuff that I've drunken before. So that was the day in 2008 that I decided that natural wine is my thing. So the plan today is to take you on a small tour, but I thought I would start with what natural wine is, to just get the hang of it. Go to Elena Pantaleoni at La Stoppa in Emilia-Romagna, and then to the Padovani sisters at Fonterenza in Tuscany, in Montalcino, and then a short tour to the Jura in France, to Alice Bouvot in Ottavin, and lastly, the last stop at Ariano Chipinti, where I started my whole journey. So that's the plan. And yeah, any questions you have, I've understood that we will take that afterwards. So just, but we have the chat as well. So any questions, just pop them in the chat. So natural wine then, what is it? the most common definition, I would say, is like pure fermented grape juice, nothing added, nothing taken away. It's the difficulty with this definition is that it's very black and white. It's very well, it's easy to understand, I think, if you know something about all the additives that normal wine is made of. But if you don't, it's like, oh, but this is any kind of wine, isn't it? It's what wine is. Well, it's actually not, because even in organic wines, up to 45 different additives and processes can be used in EU organic wine. And nothing taken away. Well, normally you take away lots of stuff when you fine and filter the wine. You can do a reverse osmosis, you can add water if it's too alcoholic, well, a number of things. So another thing that this definition lacks is this, the vineyard work, because natural wine is organic as a minimum. It's organic, biodynamic, or regenerative, but it should be organic as a minimum. It doesn't have to be certified organic, but there's always a discussion. Some people think that you should always certify, just to make sure that everyone knows, especially in Italy, I've heard that, because you can never trust an Italian. So certification can be very important. Another thing that it's this definition of like nothing added, nothing taken away misses is this, the hand-picked grapes. And the reason why that is important is that as soon as you use machines to pick the grapes, you have to add sulfur, because the grapes will be crushed. And as soon as the grapes are crushed, the fermentation starts. And then you have all kinds of bacteria going on, and you don't really know what's happening. And if it's outside, it's warm, you don't want that. So it's really important that the grapes are handpicked and whole and in good condition. So while you are, if you're handpicking, you can also, take out all the bad grapes, or you can, so you do some sorting out in the vineyard as well. Yeah. Let's see. So the difference then between natural wine and biodynamic and organic wine is what happens in the cellar. So that's what the definition really focuses on. That's why it's like nothing added, nothing taken away. But as I said, it's really not black and white. You have people who add sulfites during the process, or at least at bottling. And you have people who would rather stop making wine than add some sulfites in their wines. We have, I will give you an example later on, Alice Pouveau in the Jura, who will never, ever add anything to her wines. So it's more a continuum than it is a black and white thing. And it's important to take into account that all natural wines are not alike. They actually differ quite a lot. One other thing is that there is no international certification of natural wine. That's one of the things that critics say, that, oh, you don't know whether a natural wine is actually natural or not, because there's no international certification. On the other hand, you can say that, well, there is no international certification of organic or biodynamic wine, or of wine in general. So it doesn't really, well, it's that same argument, but you do have organic and biodynamic certifications in different countries, of course. And you do have that even when it comes to natural wine. You have in France the first appellation of natural wine, which is called Vin Méthode Nature, which came a couple of years ago. And you also have different organizations who have charters that you need to follow, like Vin Nature in Italy, and they also do controls. So they do controls of residues of pesticides and all manner of controls, actually. So yeah, there are certifications, but no international widely used. Yeah, that's it. So I think we should deep dive into some of the cases that I've written about in my book. We'll start with this woman, Elena Pantaleoni from La Stoppa. So we are in Emilia-Romagna, Colli Piacentini, very close to Valtrebbia, one of the most beautiful places on earth, in my view. I haven't been everywhere, but it's really, really, really gorgeous. Elena took over the estate in 1991 from her father, who had died, and he was a printer, but he'd bought this La Stoppa from an architect, Mr. Ageno. And her father had lots of employees who made the wines, and he had also started using some kinds of pesticides. And as soon as Elena took over in 91, she went back to the old tradition. So she went back to organics, and she also, after a few years, regrew. She puts in the old local varieties in the vineyards instead of what they had. They had Pinot Noirs, they had Cabernet Sauvignon, they had all kinds of international varieties, which really weren't really good for the soil and the climate. It's really, really hot in that place, and the soil is clayey, so very, very heavy. So nothing that Pinot Noir, for instance, likes. So Elena was inspired by old traditions and the traditional varieties that existed in her region. And that's what she still does. So she has the local Bonarda, Barbera, she has Malvasia di Candia Aromatica, she has Ortrugo and Trebbiano. And it's not the Trebbiano Toscano, it's the other Trebbiano. Well, one of the others. It's like a whole area of them out there. And her main point about natural wine is that, well, she actually doesn't like the term at all. So she calls it wine. To her, it's just simply wine. And that the other wine, that's the one that should be called something else. It should be called industrial wine or something, because to her, that's what it is. And for Elena, it's really important that wine surprises you. I have a quote here. To her, it's like wine is like food. It is not the same every time. It's not like Coca-Cola that you drink and you know exactly what you get. It's like artisanal food where it's really a process. And she also says that why discard stinky wines? Sometimes people say that natural wines are stinky. And to Elena, it's like, well, cheese is stinky. So why should we refuse stinky wines? It should be said, though, that she really, really keeps her wines for a long time to avoid that they are stinky, because normally in her region, or in her vineyards, the wines are very reductive during the first years. It's like that sulfur smell, like a struck match, but much worse. That's how her wines are when they are immature. So she ages them for very, very long, and most often she releases her wines only after like 10 years. Her Macchiona, which is her prime red wine, is one of those. So she releases them when she thinks they're ready. And I don't know if any of you are drinking anything today, but I am, and I'm drinking Ageno, which is called Ageno after the first owner of La Stoppa, that's architect I mentioned. And it's skin macerated wine, and it's one of the, well, she started making it in the early 2000s. So it was very early in the skin macerated wines revival, because it's a way that many natural winemakers like to make their whites with some skin maceration, because it stabilizes the wine. It gets it gets much more stable if they leave it on the skins. And it also needs time. So what I'm drinking now is a 2019. That was actually released before her 2018. And that's also very typical of Elena, because she does not release any wine that she doesn't think is ready. So the 19 was ready before the 18. And this one had a bit less skin contact than usual. And that's also one of the things that Elena doesn't like to talk about. She's like, I don't care how many days on the skins, or if half of it was in cement or steel tanks, stainless steel tanks. It's like, just taste it and see if you like it. So I encourage you to do that whenever you get a natural wine. All right. One of the other things, yeah, here you have the Ageno bottle. And you see it's clearly unfined and unfiltered. It's got lots of good stuff in it. And that's also one of the things that Elena, I think, is really important, that for her, natural wine or wine is wine that is from a place, and it's, you are only at the service of your place. You don't own the place. You don't, you should represent the vintage, the grapes, the climate of that particular year. You shouldn't have any rules on what kind of vessels you use or when to pick. You have to see what works. And she also says that if Ariano Chipinti, who's a friend of Elena and who I mentioned earlier on, if she were to come to La Stoppa and make wines, ideally, says Elena, the wine would taste exactly the same as if Elena made it. So she thinks that the person is actually not important. And that's what many would say, that that's not true, that's the person is part of the terroir as well. It's not just the climate and the grape varieties and the vessels you use. But to Elena, it's really about representing your place in the best way possible, to always be at service. You can, well, we don't see any appellations here, and she's actually left the appellation. She used to have an IGT, Indicazione Geografica Tipica, but decided to leave that because she wanted to simplify things and minimalize, and she really doesn't think that the appellation is actually very typical of the region. It allows for far too many international grape varieties in her view, and she would rather just make wine of her place and not be restrained by people who decide which what the wine should taste like. So no appellations anymore, and that's also quite typical of many natural winemakers. Like they don't have any appellations. It can be Vin de France or just Italian wine. So to sum up then, yes, no rules and actually no trends. That's also very important for Elena Pantalone, that to her, natural wine is not trendy, and she doesn't make wines that are trendy, even though her Ageno is very trendy at the moment because it's a skin macerated wine. she says that she doesn't care for that. So she still she wants to make wines from her place. That's the important thing. So to sum up, Elena Pantalone and some of the natural wine people, they would say this is wine. It's not natural, it's wine, simply. It's what wine should be. And that wine should surprise you. It should be different every time you try it. The vintages should be different. Everything should actually differ. And there are no rules, just lots of time. You need time to get the funkiness out of quite a few wines. Let's move to Tuscany. We are at Fonterenza. That is the Padovani twins, and they grew up in Milan and moved to Montalcino or Sant'Angelo in Colle in 1999 to their parents' summer house and started making wine. They have no wine education whatsoever, so they started out traveling and learning from others. So Stanko Radikon, who is one of the most famous people in the natural wine world from Italy, they went to him. They went to Giovanna Morganti, who's in Chianti, and to several people in France as well, and really learned what kind of wine they liked and what they wanted to make. And they are the ones who say, we don't want, or we didn't want any crap in our wine. That's what they concluded when they had been going on those trips. They really didn't want anything other than the grapes and the terroir to come through. So they work biodynamically in the vineyard. It's Margherita who is here on the picture. She's responsible for the vineyard work. And they use the biodynamic preparations. And what Margherita says is that it really makes the soil so alive. She says there's so much life in our soils, lots of birds, but they don't eat the grapes, they eat the earthworms instead, because there's just simply so much food for them. So they don't attack the grapes, because that's normally a big problem, especially with black grapes, that the birds can really see clearly. So they don't have that problem. And living soils is also one of the things that's super important for many natural winemakers. Let's see, in the winery then, we have Francesca Padovani, who's responsible. And as you see from her t-shirt, she really loves pet nuts. Well, she loves all kinds of experimentation. She says, I love experimenting, trying different kinds of vinification. I'm testing to make pet nuts. I want to have some fun. The problem is that she's in, they make Brunello di Montalcino, which is not very, it's red and it needs a lot of time, and there are rules to get it sold as a Brunello. So they have had problems with the certification or the appellation, and because they have released their wines later than many others, and of course it then tastes differently. Often it's got more volatile acidity, and you compare one vintage with another. So a couple of times they've been refused, but then have had to go to Rome actually to get an appeal, and have managed to do that. So they have always been able to sell their Brunellos as Brunellos. But it's it's a tricky thing for natural winemakers, this appellation, because many of them will say that appellations they are not anymore the signal of typicity. It's a signal of well, of rules. Not that, you know, the appellations were used to be, should be the proof that the wine comes from certain kinds of grapes from the region and nothing else. Not like, you know, the imported grapes from Northern Africa or something. But now it is a style that has to be followed. That's what they say. So many natural winemakers have trouble getting their wines through the appellation system. And that's why many of them have left. But the Padovani sisters still carry on, and they don't have a biodynamic certification, but they do have an organic certification. But they don't know for how long, because as Margarita, who works in the vineyard, says, it's like, why should our wine, which is made without any additives and nothing taken away, why should it be lumped together with other organic wines that have lots of additives and processes done to them? So she wants the labels on wines to be like, you know, like food items, so you can actually see what has been added to the wines, where all the ingredients are mentioned. She says, if people only knew how much crap there is in their wines, they would think differently. So that's also one of the things that natural winemakers come back to. That's in regular wines, there's so much crap, and they don't want to be lumped together with all those wines. So that's one of the reasons why some will not certify be certified organic or biodynamic. All right then. So yes, the Fontarenza sisters, biodynamic. They are experimenting a lot, like many other natural winemakers, and well, they think appellations are tough, like many other winemakers. Natural. Let's go to the Jura on a short trip and meet this woman who's on the cover of my book. This is Alice Bouvot. She's an enologist, so very different from the Fontarenza sisters, who had no experience or wine education whatsoever. Alice had been studying wine for many years, and she'd been traveling as well to different countries in South America and the US and in Australia or New Zealand. I don't remember anymore. But the thing is that she had been trained into finding faults. That was her job. She never ever asked herself, do I like this wine? Until the first time she tried natural wine, which was in a wine bar in Arbois, in the center of the Jura. And she says, I didn't know if it was beer, cider, or wine, but I knew I liked it. And she really wanted to try making that. And it's actually, her wines are not for everyone, I would say. They are wines that really, well, this quote says it all. Sometimes you don't know if it's beer, cider, or actually vinegar sometimes. They can be really, well, on the edge or over the edge when it comes to volatile acidity. But the thing is that for Alice, she's very uncompromising. She, if she likes it, she will sell it. And this is her vineyards. She has about 3 hectares. So she started in the mid-2000s together with her then partner, Charles Lagan. But she was really the one who, who made the moves and did most of the work. She also has a micro négociant, so she buys grapes from her friends that she trusts, who work organically or biodynamically, and she herself works biodynamically. She picks all the grapes at her friends' places as well, so she never she never buys grapes that someone else has picked. So she has a Tour de France where she goes with a big truck and has pickers with her, and they are a big team and going around. And the thing that she really says is this: everything I do is based on emotion. The work in the vineyard, when I harvest grapes, I taste and taste. Is it ready for me? If I taste and get an emotion, it's perfect. For me, the biggest mistake is when the wine is perfect, but you don't have emotion. So emotion is really the key for her. She has a laissez-faire approach in the winery. It's more like infusions, her wines. She lets the skin sit with the grape juice for 8-9 months. It depends, of course, from vintage to vintage. But she really doesn't do any pigeage or crush the grapes to get more flavors or tannins out of them. So these are some of her labels of the micro négociants that she has. So the small gnomes here, that's her typical signature. And her basic message is, do I like it? And she thinks that everyone should ask themselves that. It's irrelevant if other people like it or whatever other people do or think. If I really think that something should be done in a certain way, she will do it. So she's guided by emotion, but also by trust to the grapes and the juice and the wines, which is why she has a laissez-faire approach. And that laissez-faire approach is something that many natural winemakers would say, no, I would not say I have a laissez-faire approach. I really have a very much a hands-on approach. So this is not like one size fits all, but to Alice, this is really important. And she is also one of the persons who would do a 0-0 approach, so no added sulfites in any process. Well, actually no additives at all. So pure fermented grape juice, nothing added, nothing taken away in its purest sense. So very black and white there. All right, let's do the last stop to Vittoria in Sicily, to this woman, Arianna Occhipinti, which was my first natural wine love that I told you about. And Vittoria, for those who have been there, it's a really, well, let's say it's a bit like I imagine the Wild West to be in the 1800s. It's quite rough. It's not at all like the Etna, where it's green and lush and nice and small villages. This is a plateau. The wind is blowing from Africa during summertime, and there's this small layer of sand everywhere. And the people are quite rough as well. And this is where Arianna Occhipinti started to make wine as a 21-year-old woman. So she was really, well, she was brought up in Vittoria and she went to school in Milan and decided to come back and start her own wine business. And from that 1 hectare that she started out with, she now has like 28 hectares. I think that was the last count, but she's always buying more because she says it really hurts when I see abandoned land. So whenever she sees abandoned land and she has the possibility of buying it, she will. And she has lots of other crops as well, not just vines. So she has oranges, pears, olive groves. She has this old wheat, Tominia, and yeah, she's really an amazing woman with a mission. Because what she really longs to do is this: She says, it's the land of the future. I want a heritage, even though I don't have children. I hope that people in 100 years' time will say, that woman, she was thinking, she was ahead of her time. She did good things. And it's, well, here you see the very, well, the soil here is chalk and sand. So chalk underneath a thin layer of sand. And it's really poor soils. So what she does is work biodynamically to get life into the soil. And to her, it's really the only way to farm, either organically or biodynamically, because it's the only way you don't take away too much from the soil without giving anything back. So that's really her mission, to try and get people to understand that organic and biodynamic farming is the only way forward and the way of the future. And that's quite a hard mission in Vittoria and Sicily. What she also tries to do is, these are Frappato vines. She really tries to show what the local grape varieties, Frappato and Nero d'Avolo, can really do. Frappato was used for mostly bulk wines decades ago, and she has set out to on a mission to get people to understand that Frappato can be such a complex and diverse and changing grape variety, and very elegant. So she also has different contrade. So different, like in Burgundy, you have different crus, different vineyard plots where you make the wine exactly in the same way, but to show the different in the soil and the climates, the microclimates in the vineyards. And she also says, Ariano, that, well, I'm not a philosopher, I'm a farmer, and I do what I know works. So she really has a hands-on approach, but I would say that she's a bit of a philosopher as well. She's not just a farmer. All right, then, yeah, and she dry farms. You can see there's no water anywhere here, no hoses or no drip irrigation. So even though it's, above 40 degrees in summertime, the vines will have gone so far, so deep into the soil that they will find these small pockets of water, which is left in the chalk to get them through summer. So that's one of the things that I think should be part of the natural wine definition, that it should be no irrigation, because to me, if you take care of the land and the nature, you should not need irrigation to get grapes. So, but we're not there yet, but most natural wine growers will have no irrigation, so dry farming. Right. That's Ariana's mission. Show what the local varieties can do, the Nero d'Avola and the Frappato. She dry farms, and she does it for future generations. It's really that's her mission. Okay, this is me. We're getting close to the end. This is me having a half fermented Sangiovese at Fontarenza, and it was incredibly sour. And I was so surprised by it, because Francesca Paduani had just taken one grape and she was like, oh, this is so good. And I was like, and that's one of the things that I think that natural wine should really be. It should be a surprise. It should always surprise you. You should never know what to get in your glass. And to do that, you need wine without crap. So basically nothing added and nothing taken away. But it's also important to remember that you should know your producers. You should try to get information, because it is a continuum. There are producers who actually filter their wines, even though it's, well, they call it like just heavy filtering, but fining is also some growers do. And I've even seen cold stabilization for some of the wines at lower levels. And to me, then it's really not natural wine anymore, but that's my personal opinion. And I think that consumers should know what's been done to the wine. So wine labels with some ingredients on and information on processes would be really, really good. So thank you. This is it. And if you want to reach out on Instagram, that's my Instagram at Gjerde Camilla. And I have a webpage where you can order my book, for instance, and read some more about the producers, camillagjerde.com. Thank you.
Thanks a lot to you, Camilla.